Okay, so firstly, I'd like to say welcome to the webinar today. My name is Matt Gauntlet, and I'm the project manager for the 5 Oak Green Flood Resilience Scheme. And I'm working in partnership with Denise Haylett from Tunbridge Wells Borough Council, who also joins us on the call. We're also joined by David Christie from Watertight International and Russell Burton from RAB Consultants. The webinar today is to provide you with information on the funding behind the scheme, what PFR is, and the products available, the process from survey to install, and to meet the team delivering the project. RAB Consultants and Watertight International will be talking about their role a little later on in the presentation. But before we start, please note that you're able to type any questions into the Zoom chat at any point during the presentation, and we will try our best to answer as many at the end. Next slide, please. So 5 Oak Green has a long history of flooding, with the most notable events being in February 2020 during Storm Ciara, and most recently in August 2021. It's covered by several flood risk policies, including the Medway Catchment Management Plan, which classes 5 Oak Green as a high priority to protect. 5 Oak Green is situated within the Alder Stream catchment, with the main channel flowing through the centre before joining the River Medway north of the village. Next slide, please. So following the flood from Storm Ciara in 2020, Tunbridge Wells Borough Council set up an online form for those residents impacted by either Storm Ciara or Dennis. The purpose of this form was to capture their details, the impacts of the floods on their property, and to gain photographic evidence and to ascertain whether or not they were eligible for the Property Flood Resilience Grant. So from here, a list of the most vulnerable properties was determined and formed the basis for Tunbridge Wells Borough Council to develop and implement a local property flood resilience team. In late 2020, the Environment Agency were brought on board to help manage the project. We developed a full business case to request additional flood defence grant and aid funding from DEFRA, and this was to top up the funding made available through Tunbridge Wells Borough Council. The scheme was then put to tender using the Environment Agency's Property Flood Resilience Framework, and this is a national list of approved suppliers that meet industry recognised standards. The scheme has been combined with the East Peckham scheme, which enabled us to save time on the tender process for the contractor, and will enable us to install measures much quicker into residents' homes. It's important to note that if we hadn't combined with East Peckham, this could have pushed back the installations by a further 6 months. And then earlier this year in April 2021, following a competitive tender process, Watertight International were awarded the contract. You may be familiar with Watertight as they delivered the Middle Medway Flood Resilience Scheme to over 230 properties in the Yalding and Collier Street area. RAB Consultants will provide an independent approval through a post-installation flood risk report. And then last month, in July 2021, we were given confirmation that we had gained full funding for the project. Next slide, please. So what does the scheme cover? The Property Flood Resilience Scheme will protect all properties that signed up for and received the Flood Resilience Grant following the floods from Storm Ciara. Properties that can provide evidence of internal flooding will also be included within the scheme. This could be in the form of an insurance letter or photographs. If you've already received the eligible letter, you will not have to provide any evidence. There may be some instances where an adjoining neighbour that may not have been initially contacted may be included within the scheme to ensure full protection to all properties. However, this will be looked into by the project team and approached on a case-by-case basis. Most properties will be fully funded, but some larger properties that require more measures than others, we may require a contribution from the homeowner. A contribution may also be required for some aesthetic upgrades, not required for flood risk. And an example of where a contribution would be needed would be to cover the costs, for example, of an upgraded composite flood door. However, these options will be discussed with the homeowner during the works inspection survey to best suit the property and their need. The survey is paid for by the Environment Agency and Tunbridge Wells Borough Council, and there is no obligation to take up the PFR measures after the initial survey. If you have any further questions or doubts at any part of the process, please get in contact with myself or Watertight, who will be happy to help. The obligation to take the PFR measures only begins once the homeowner has signed the agreement, and this is done only when the homeowner is fully aware of the measures proposed, and in a few cases aware of any additional costs. If you have a listed building, we will apply on your behalf for a listed building consent from Tunbridge Wells Borough Council, and we know there's a few on the scheme, about 4 or 5. But once the homeowner agreement has been signed, we will do this on your behalf. We've already been in conversation with the Conservation Officer at Tunbridge Wells Borough Council to make him aware of the scheme. Next slide, please. So this is just a brief overview of the process. So property flood resilience has been determined by the Environment Agency as the most appropriate solution for 5 Oak Green, and this is due to the funding gap for larger schemes, but also for the fact that funding has been made available following the floods from Storm Ciara. All eligible homeowners have been contacted by a letter, and we've engaged on the scheme through letters, also by talking to the local parish council and by hosting this webinar. Unfortunately, drop-in sessions haven't been possible this time round due to the COVID pandemic. So the next step for homeowners is to sign up for your detailed work inspection survey, and you can do this at 5oakgreen@watertightinternational.com. That's 5oakgreen@watertightinternational.com. So please send an email with your name, telephone number and home address. And if you're a tenant, please include your landlord's details. Watertight will then contact you to arrange a time slot to carry out the detailed works inspection survey. And this will assess which PFR measures are most suitable for you and your property. We will approach surveys based on the vulnerability of the property. And we've already begun surveying some very high-risk properties, but we'll be continuing surveying into September on the week commencing of the 20th. The next step, so the proposed measures will then be sent from Watertight back to the Environment Agency, and if they're acceptable, they will be proposed to you as part of that homeowner agreement. The agreements will be sent to you in the post, and they will need to be signed by each person named on the property deed. This is really important. Once we have received back the signed homeowner agreement, Watertight will then be able to order the products. Without the homeowner agreement, we will unable to be able to move forward. So please do not hesitate to contact either the EA or Watertight if you have any questions in regards to this agreement. Our aim is to ensure that you fully understand the PFR measures proposed before you sign and return. What we don't want is for any residents to sit in silence and delay returning their agreement. There is no obligation to agree to the measures. However, there will likely not be another scheme in 5 Oak Green in the near future. The next steps will be manufacturing, and there's approximately a 6 to 8 week lead time at the moment for product manufacture, after which Watertight will then contact you to arrange a suitable installation date, and these normally take place over a period of 1 to 2 days. So following the installation, one of the project team will visit to provide training on how to use the PFR measures, and you'll be provided with a handover pack including fitting instruction, storage, maintenance and warranties. RAB consultants will then undertake an independent post-installation flood risk report to ensure the agreed measures have been installed and that they have been installed appropriately. And then after all of the measures have been installed on all properties, we will arrange a mock flood exercise to enable residents to practice putting their PFR measures into place. Next slide, please. So just a little bit more information around the works inspection survey. So there'll be one works inspection survey on your property with one team member from each of RAB Consult, Watertight and the Environment Agency. RAB consultants are involved in 2 stages, the first of which is to survey the property, identify the flood risk and discuss potential entry points with the residents. The second stage will be to then provide the independent post-installation flood risk report. Watertight International will be working alongside RAB to identify suitable PFR measures and to discuss and agree options with you, the homeowner. The Environment Agency will also be on site to provide support and local knowledge to both RAB and Watertight. So hopefully that gave you a good idea of how and why the scheme is being delivered. I'll now pass you over to David from Watertight, who will go into a bit more detail about the PFR measures. Thanks very much, and over to you, David.
Great, thank you very much, Matt. I'm David Christie. I am a project and technical manager for Watertight. I'm serving as the project manager for the 5 Oak Green Flood Resilience Scheme. So if I just run through a quick summary of what I'm talking about this evening, will be an introduction to Watertight. We'll be talking about the Watertight PFR experience in the industry, talking about property flood resilience, what is it? We're looking through a scheme outline of the 5 Oak Green PFR scheme itself. I'll be showing some examples of PFR measures and the choices available to you. And then we'll go through a section of frequently asked questions. Then at the end, we'll be asking you to consider getting your survey booked, and we'll look forward to seeing you. So next slide, please. So I work for Watertight. We trade as Watertight. We're actually registered as Flood Control NI Limited. We're the leading providers of PFR within the UK, and we provide PFR through the Environment Agency framework and to LLFAs, that's lead local flood authorities. As Environment Agency PFR framework providers, we as Watertight design, source, install and maintain bespoke and innovative property flood resilience solutions. We work nationally. We have offices in Runcorn, which is in Cheshire, and our head office is based in Bangor, Northern Ireland, which is where I'm based. Watertight, when we work in PFR schemes, we deliver PFR taking into account the person, the property and the flood. And we bring forward a design solution delivered within the scope of the industry code of practice. So next slide, please. So a little bit about the experience of Watertight within the PFR industry. So 5 Oak Green has been procured on the Environment Agency's PFR framework. We as Watertight bring a wealth of PFR experience. This includes the Middle Midway Flood Resilience Scheme, which I personally worked on. That started a little over 2 years ago, where we delivered final solutions to in excess of 230 properties within the scheme. So I know the area quite well. Attend the area regularly throughout the Middle Midway project. I've been across several times already this year surveying within the East Peckham scheme, which has also then recently fallen in with the 5 Oak Green PFR scheme, where, as Matt said, we've already started surveying some of the high risk properties. If you have a look at the table there shown on the slide, you can see just the number of properties and the schemes that we're engaged in across the country. So what we're trying to get across is, please trust us collectively as Watertight, BEA and RIB consultants. We will work collaboratively to make this scheme a success. Next slide, please. So property flood resilience, PFR, what is it? So whilst engineered flood defences, flood warnings and upper catchment measures can make an improvement, it's essential for the resilience to be built into the individual properties. PFR is designed to allow people to live with the risk of flooding. You can never eliminate the risk of flooding, but you can reduce the risk of water getting into your property and further reduce the impact if it does get in. So PFR includes any measures to reduce the risks to people and property, enabling households, businesses to reduce flood damage, speed up recovery, reoccupy the properties after a flood event, and also helps to potentially obtain flood insurance cover more easily and affordably. PFR includes resistance measures. So this scheme is really focused around resistance measures. These are designed to keep water out of a property. PFR also includes recoverability measures. These are things that there will be advice given following the works inspection survey and contained in the RIB consultant's report. The recoverability measures are specifically measures product and construction methods to try and reduce the damage caused if water does enter a building. So it'll be things like raising plug sockets and resilient flooring. Next slide, please. So within PFR range of measures and choices, this scheme, as I mentioned, will be funding resistance measures and will be advising on the recoverability measures. One thing that's important that I do wish to point out is Watertight, we as Watertight, we do not manufacture any products, but we provide an extensive range of solutions from partnering manufacturers. These are all fitted by our own qualified, experienced and employed installation teams. All solutions are bespoke, certified and fit for purpose. So as we said before, we look at the person, the property, and the flood. So we adhere to industry best practice. We always act impartially. We don't favour any particular suppliers or equipment, materials, or services. We operate in line with the industry code of practice, where we always seek to ensure that the specification and deployment of PFR is proportionate to the risk of the property and the resources available, taking into the requirements of yourselves as the end users, whilst maintaining a large degree of flexibility and common sense. The next slide, please. So if I may just talk about some examples of the PFR measures that are available through this scheme. If we look at doorway protection, one of the main methods of doorway protection is flood barriers, which is shown in the image there. The modular system, we can accommodate most openings, and as you'll see in this, that's a conservatory, so even doors that don't necessarily open still need to be protected under certain circumstances. Next slide, please. Again, just some more examples of the barriers and their adaptability to various doorways and openings. I'd also point out how we can try to aesthetically reduce the impact of these barriers by powder coating the rails that are fitted to try and match the existing building. Next slide, please. Again, this is further examples. These are floodgates, particularly suitable for listed properties where there's minimal works required to the opening to allow these to fit, provide that level of flood resistance desired. Next slide, please. And the main final method of doorway protection is flood doors. Now there's UPVC or composite flood doors. Matt has already mentioned that the composite flood doors are mainly an aesthetic upgrade, would require contribution. These doors all shown in the images are UPVC flood doors. As you'll see, they're available in a range of styles, colours, designs, handle furnitures, etc. to try and match in, provide an appropriate solution that's sympathetic with the existing property. We can cover French doors, as you see in that image, that's French doors with side lights to accommodate the wider openings commonly encountered. Next slide, please. Some other measures would then be air bricks. We have automatic closing air bricks, which you'll see in the image. These close off automatically in the event of a flood, and post-flooding, they revert to their primary purpose, which is, of course, ventilation for the property. Next slide, please. And again, vent covers, there's not a range of ways of dealing with ventilation requirements. Sometimes air bricks can be substituted in place of existing vents. Other times we'll provide covers or sometimes have to relocate the existing vents above the flood risk level. Next slide, please. Non-return valves. So these can be fitted to domestic waste pipes and foul waste pipes to prevent water backflowing through these services into the property. Next slide, please. And pumps. So pumps primarily fall between sump pumps and puddle pumps. Sump pumps are typically employed where there's suspended timber floors with a void underneath, where they'll suppress the water within that footprint of the property. Puddle pumps are typically provided to every property within the scheme. These are to deal with water should ingress into the property. They'll pick up water from a low level, discharge it. Next slide, please. So if we fall into some frequently asked questions, the most popular frequently asked question is, do you have to pay anything towards this? Generally, no. As Matt mentioned, there may be a couple of instances where they go along, where properties go above the budget, but the scheme's funded up to £7,500. This will, in our experience, cover the vast majority of properties. Will it affect my ability to get insurance? The answer is no. It will in fact benefit you in being able to get insurance. Flood Re is a scheme which is available to all homes owner occupied and built before 2009. Another common question is, will it mean that my house is on some sort of a bad list in terms of insurance and resale? Again, no. Property flood resilience is being mainstreamed. It will enhance your property. If you're looking to sell your property, or insurance companies are all fully aware of the flood risk that your property is already at. So how can you be sure that Watertight will do a good job? Well, RAB consultants have been brought in to sign off on the post-installation flood risk report, and the EA have oversight of this scheme. So it's a collaborative approach between Watertight, RAB consultants, and the EA, all working to provide the best solutions for your property. What if I change my mind after the survey? So there's nothing to stop you changing your mind. As Matt mentioned, there's no obligation to proceed with the scheme. The works inspection survey is free, and only once you sign the homeowner agreement will the works go ahead. At that point, we'll look to procure any products or materials for your property and arrange installation. Up until the homeowner agreement is signed, you can change your mind. There's no obligation to proceed. So how do I book an appointment? My contact details will be at the end of this presentation. Please just get in touch. We're currently looking to book people in for surveys in the week commencing 20th of September. And lastly, can I speak to you one-to-one with any questions? Yes, absolutely, of course. Please feel free to give us a call or contact us by email, and we're happy to speak to you anytime. Some questions will come up that are specific to individual people's properties. These are generally best dealt with at the property at the time of the works inspection survey, where we can deal with the individual nature of each property or your concerns at that time. So thank you very much for listening. My contact details are on the slide showing at the moment. Please, as I say, do feel free to get in touch if you have any questions or queries, and get your survey booked. We'll look forward to seeing you at the work inspection survey. Okay, that's my last slide. So if I could now pass you over to Russell Burton from RAB Consultants.
Thanks, David. That's great. Thank you. My name is Russell Burton, Managing Director of RAB Consultants. As you can see on the screen there, we're a company dedicated to increasing resilience and reducing flood risk for people in places where they work, live and play. So in amongst the various works we do in the flood risk field, in which we specialise, property flood resilience and property flood resilience surveys is very much one of the services that we offer and have done for several years now. Next slide, please. Yes, so as David's alluded to, our role in this project is to firstly deliver what's called the flood risk assessment. So we'll be taking data from the Environment Agency and other sources, and yourselves indeed, so that we get a good assessment of what the flood risks are, the various sources and the pathways for that flood water to approach properties, and then the impacts that it has on the receptors, which are yourselves and your properties. We are an independent surveyor for the project, and so we'll be assessing the routes of ingress for the property flood resilience survey, and also gathering information through a questionnaire about your needs and capabilities to use the property flood resilience measures that will be provided. And then working collaboratively with Watertight and the Environment Agency to agree what measures are appropriate for that particular property, your particular property, and then we should be able to sign that off, provide a PFR report, both beforehand so that you can see what those proposals are with Watertight, and then signing them off, which is what you can use to support your insurance claims later on. Next slide, please. So what will happen? So the surveys comprise of 3 elements. So as I say, the first element is a questionnaire, which we will be asking some questions about your house and yourselves. So your availability, for example, whether you're at home or actually away from home for significant periods of time, and your ability to install some of these products. So we get an understanding of that, and then the things that we can recommend to overcome any issues that arise from that. That questionnaire will be issued once you've signed up. through the link that David is providing. Then once you're signed up, then we'll have your contact details and share that questionnaire with you to be filled in online. But also then we'll be filling any questions in when we actually meet out on site if you have any difficulty in completing that questionnaire. We'll then do the physical survey of the property to identify the routes of ingress, and as I say, that'll be with Watertight and the Environment Agency. So essentially, we walk away from that property with what is the agreed best solution for each of those properties that we can then install into the report, which then will be used for your agreement with Watertight and then the installation. So after we're out of the picture then during that installation phase, but once the works have been completed and are in place, then we'll undertake a return visit again with Watertight, and we'll jointly inspect the works and sign off that they've been installed as agreed and in the correct manner. Next slide, please. So the resident questionnaire, as you can see, it is an online form that we'll be sending you the link for. It needs to be completed ideally before the survey, so our surveyors can come armed with that information and ask any further questions off the back of that. If you're unable to complete this, you can. We'll carry that questionnaire. We'll complete that questionnaire with you while we're actually doing the survey. But it does speed the whole process up and help us to do this as quickly as possible. And any questions you're unclear on, we can address during the site visit. So there will be ample opportunity for discussion with RAB surveyors and the rest of the team when we're out there actually surveying the property. Next slide, please. Good picture to use, actually. So this is the guy you'll probably meet who comes out to the survey, Matt, in the picture there. So there are some requirements for us coming out to do that pre-installation survey. It's really important that we're able to get around all the external elevations of the property and see the external walls of the property. So if you've got lean-tos or logs or just bins in the way of the walls, we do ask that you try and clear as much of the way as possible around each property so that we can see what the building itself and spot any routes of ingress. So obviously, if we can't see it, then we won't be able to make comment on it. We'll be carrying out a measured and photographic survey of all the external walls, and that will feature in the report that we produce. So that all of those items are registered and form the bill of quantities that David and the team will then be able to price up and provide your options to you. And finally, I guess in these times of COVID, and good that things are now easing now, we do only enter properties where it's absolutely essential. So again, we're managing the risks by reducing any time that we do have in properties themselves, and speaking to you inside, we try and limit it to the absolute minimum and only essential needs. So that may be, for example, if we have to pass through the property to get to the rear of the property or the rear garden, then that would be a reason why we need to come through the property. Or if there's an elevation that's blocked by something, a lean-to or something that means that we can't see if there are any external routes of ingress, then it would be helpful for us to see the internal view of the wall to see whether there are any ingress routes through that particular wall. So it's only when it's absolutely necessary we go inside. Thank you. And finally, so once the installation has been complete, then we come along to quality assurance and sign it off. So we inspect all the installed measures and that all the measures that have been identified have been installed and that has been done correctly. And we confirm that you are happy with those measures. If there are any snags or problems that you've encountered, we try and capture those there at the same time. And all this then gets written up into what's called a post-installation flood risk report, which you can share with your insurer to show the works and the measures that you've taken to increase the resilience to flooding of your property. Thank you.
Okay, thanks Russell for that. That's really helpful there. So moving on now, I would like to introduce a short video from Mary Donoghue and Sue Chalkley, who recently joined the East Peckham scheme webinar earlier this summer. So Mary is very experienced in the flood risk industry. She was the CEO for the National Flood Forum from 2006 to 2010, and now holds a similar position for the Know Your Flood Risk campaign. Working with her builder, Mary has implemented a suite of measures that include resistance, that limit water entering the property, and also recoverability measures that help speed up recovery if water does enter the property. Sue Chalkley is a resident of East Peckham and has had great success with self-funded property flood resilience measures. But it's important to note, just be mindful that the 5 Vote Green scheme will only be covering resistance measures that limit water entering your property. Yeah, if we can move on and play the video, that would be great. Thank you.
As has been said, I've been flooded myself on quite a few occasions, and I did make my home flood recoverable because it was virtually impossible to keep it out. And when I did flood, I was able to mop it out, sanitize, and get back downstairs again very quickly. And since then, I've been a passionate advocate. That was 20 years ago for PFR, and I'm so delighted that it's now mainstreamed. You can see these pictures of the sandbags. Most people we see on the telly when they're flooded are dashing for sandbags, and local authorities are delivering sandbags. They don't work. This is an excellent example of sandbags not working. They filter the water, so you get clean water in your home or your business, but it doesn't stop the water from coming in. So compare the next slide, please. These are some fabulous photographs that I've gathered over the years of property flood resilience measures, such as those that Gareth has been talking about, working in anger. And I particularly like the ones that I've said that I've highlighted, because you can see the sandbags not working, but actually what we can't see off the photograph is a pair of red dry shoes, because that particular property hasn't flooded. And you can see the garage above that just not flooding because the measures have been working. And you know, I commend them to you, and I hope you'll all go ahead with this. But what about recoverability, which isn't covered with this scheme, but it's something that you might want to think about, that you could self-fund? So if we could go on to the next slide, please. I have travelled around the country for the last couple of years in partnership with the Environment Agency and Flood Re, and I've interviewed about 40 homeowners and businesses to find out what they have done to A, try and keep the water out, or B, help the homes to recover more quickly, with really positive stories to tell. I visited a lot of properties that were sort of challenged last February, and because of the measures people have installed and because of the recoverability, they were either didn't flood at all. One of the properties that I went to visit said that he was on flood warning for 3 years on the banks of the River Aire in Leeds, and they had more problem with their incontinent cat than they did with the river raging past their home for 3 weeks. And so they're really passionate advocates. If you want to read more about this, and you can follow me if you're on Twitter, it's on my pinned tweet, and I commend it to you because it's real people doing real stuff. And also, if you're not on Twitter, you can go onto my website. It's on the front page. It's marydono.co.uk, DHONAU. But in a couple of weeks, it's going to go to .com. So if you go on to .co.uk and it's not there, go to .com instead. So what I'm going to do without any further ado is hand over to Sue Chalkley, who is well known to you all, I'm sure, because she led the I don't know whether you still lead it, the Flood Action Action Group, and I did actually come to East Peckham to celebrate the opening of your reservoir flood alleviation scheme many years ago. And Sue is going to talk to you. I'm going to hand over to her because she's a professional. Talk to you about what she's done at her own home level to reduce the impact that a flood can have, and also enable her to recover more quickly. So thank you for listening to me, and over to Sue. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. I'm not sure I do know everybody actually, but for those who don't know, I live in Solhatch. I've lived here, or we've lived here since 1988, so we've been here a while. And we flood mainly from the belt, from the Colt Stream, and from the Bourne, and from runoff. If the Medway floods significantly, we would flood from the Medway as well, but mainly that kind of Pinkham and down in the village. So our first flood experience was in 2000, when we were flooded a few times during the year, and then in October 3 times. And as a result of that, we went into temporary accommodation, and we really knew nothing. And the insurance company were great, and they put the home back like for like, and we just thought it was a once in a blue moon experience, and we kind of would get on with our lives. And so we moved back in the autumn of 2001, and then that New Year's Eve there was another massive flood, so we were only at home for 6 months, and everything was ruined again. Kitchen came out again. I think we bought 3 kitchens from the guy at B&Q, who knew quite well because we've been back and forward so many times. And that time, I think, having only just got back in and lived through, I think if you've been flooded, worst bit actually is after the floods. During the flood, there's a bit of a dread pumping and your neighbours around, and it's afterwards when you're just constantly dealing with the really complex project management all day long on the phone, waiting for people to answer the phone, just trying to sort everything out, which goes on and on and on. So anyway, the second time we decided we really didn't want to be put into temporary accommodation. We wanted to stay at home and supervise the work, but because the ground floor was stripped out and dehumidifiers were in, we actually lived in the loft, and we did live in the loft, and we lived there for 9 months. It wasn't brilliant, but it was better than living somewhere else. We were able to supervise the work, and the insurance company was great, and they allowed us to appoint builders that we knew, that we trusted, and they were just fantastic because they just used their common sense, and they'd say to us, do you really want to put it back like this? Why don't you do it like that? And very often it wouldn't cost any more, and I'd ring the insurance company and they'd say, that's fine, do it that way. So as an example, the first time all of our electrics were relayed under the floor, and then we flooded again, and we thought, no, we don't want any electrics down at that level. So we don't have any electricity below about 2 foot, and all our sockets and everything is a bit higher, and that's absolutely fine. And actually, as you get older, it's quite convenient as well. They put floodgates at all our doors, so we just had simple floodgates that were made of wooden frames with tongue groove boards that we dropped in and wedged in, and then when we flood, they swell up and become more or less watertight. But because our floor was, when you've been flooded, you kind of know where the lowest point of your house is, because that's the last part to dry out. That's where the puddle remains for the longest time. So while the floor was up, we dug a pit and put a submersible automatic pump in there. They don't cost very much. They're only, well, I think they're about £60. But anyway, we put a pump in. What do we else? So we also dug a trench around the outside of the house that was 18 inches down and 18 inches out, so kind of L shape. Literally just laid that blue heavy duty polythene that you see. Then we put paving slabs against the wall and rendered it. So we kind of slightly tanked the outside of the house, but our house is 200 years old, so it kind of leaks and water just appears from, I don't know, it just appears to the floor. And then we had a new build, we had an extension built, and we put extra high thresholds. So you have to kind of like climb out of the house to go out. And there's a few other things we did, like the plaster didn't go right the way down to the floor. We had high skirting. Anyway, the main premise that we were working on was that we knew that water would get in. We couldn't stop it getting in, but what we wanted to do was to keep it to an inch or two. We felt if we could keep it to an inch or two, we would stay in control. And so with the measures to slow the water coming in, and then the pumping it out, and people say, well, what's the point, because you're surrounded by flood water. But actually, as long as you're not flooded for too long, and we tend not to be in the village, it's usually about a day at a time, just pump it out into the flood water. And that's what we did. And then in 2013, there was a major flood on Christmas Eve. And it was just amazing, actually, because all of the measures worked. We just had a slither of water through the house. We kept ourselves busy by sweeping it into the pit. We didn't really need to, because it would have gone into the pit anyway, but I don't know, you just nervous energy, you feel you need to be doing something. It was astounding, really, because Christmas Day, we were eating our turkey. Couldn't believe it, just really, really couldn't believe it. And so I would really advocate putting in measures to protect your home, whether it's resilience or resistance or what, anything you can do. And I always remember Neil Gunn from the Environment Agency saying to me once, you put a roof on your house to protect it from the rain, why wouldn't you do something to protect it from flooding? And I'm not in any way letting off the government or DEFRA or the Environment Agency from doing up the bigger measures, because I think we need those too, but we need to protect our homes. So it's kind of a bit of both, the capital works and us doing what we can to protect our homes. But the main thing really was just, actually, I think we felt just euphoric that we'd had a flood. It hadn't been a crazy panic, because the water was coming in so slowly and being pumped out, that we were able to move things that needed moving. We've become quite experienced at it over the years. Slight worry for me now is that we've had another extension built, and until that's tested, I don't know whether the works we put in there will work, but hopefully they will. We've got a downstairs shower now, so we have a non-return valve. It's just interesting to see, but I think that's all I wanted to say about our experience. Yeah, slow in, fast out, that's my motto.
Well, thank you very much for that, Sue, and I'm sure you'll all agree how powerful that was, to be flooded on Christmas Day and still eating your turkey on Christmas Eve and eating your turkey on Christmas Day. And many of the stories in my ebook are exactly the same. And I hope that what Sue has said and what I have said and all the other speakers will encourage you to take up the grant. And I look forward to hearing how it's all gone ultimately. And good luck to you all. And let's all hope it works for you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so thank you for that. Hopefully that gave you a bit of an idea from sort of a first person experience from Sue's house over in East Peckham there. So before we move on to questions, I just wanted to highlight the key information to take away from the presentation today. So firstly, please note down 5 Oak Green at watertightinternational.com and make sure you send an email to sign up for your works inspection survey. And then following sign up, remember that Watertight will contact you to arrange a 1-hour survey during the week commencing the 20th of September. When your measures have been designed, please be prompt in signing your homeowner agreement, as we cannot order the measures without this. And then finally, we are about to open the floor to questions, but if you have any questions you'd rather discuss offline, then please get in contact with the EA, Tunbridge Wells Borough Council or Watertight. And for today's questions, please keep them about the scheme. And if you have any questions directly related to your property or individual circumstances, then also please get in contact with us via the team inbox. So yeah, we'll go over to some questions, and I see that there's a few that have come through on the chat. So the first question was about having a copy of this presentation, and yes, this presentation has been recorded today. And it will be uploaded to the dedicated 5 Oak Green website that we have created. So that is www.5oakgreenpfr.com. Yes, we will be uploading the video to that website, and we'll also be putting lots of other useful information on there as well about property flood resilience, and also just general things around the scheme as well. Then we'll have a look at some other questions. So, So we've got a question about will a suitable certificate be provided that will be acceptable to my insurance company in order to reduce the eye-watering premiums? So yes, all of the measures will have all of their warranties and certificates provided with them. I'm not sure whether maybe David Christie could expand a little bit more on the sort of certificates that are provided with the measures.
Yeah, so I think the certificate that will be invested to the insurance company will be the post-installation flood risk report.
Yeah.
All the other certificates in the handover pack will be in relation to electrical works. Any electrical works that are done will be certified, and warranties will be provided for all products. May I actually defer to Russell on the PFR certificate, if I may?
Yeah, that's fine, David. Yeah. So the post-installation flood report, as the format of it has been previously agreed with the Association of British Insurers, so it should be a document that they recognise. There is, I suppose, just a word for the future, really, that there's an expectation that Flood Re that has been mentioned on the presentation tonight. Flood Re are coming forward with proposals for a flood performance certificate in the future, which is something like your energy performance certificates that you get for your houses. That isn't in place yet. But the information that we will gather in the post-installation flood risk report will inform those certificates in the future, so that these measures will help that in the future. Regarding that mention of eye-watering premiums, certainly your insurers should be aware of Flood Re, and if they're not, then you should be pointing them at Flood Re, because that's a reinsurance facility that the insurance industry have, which is government backed, and that is specifically there to avoid homeowners having unduly large premiums in flood risk areas. So if you're getting large premiums, make sure that your insurance company is aware of Flood Re and including that in your quotes.
Thank you very much. That's great. And then one last question that I can see that's popped up is around eligibility for certain properties on this scheme. So I think, as I previously said, the scheme will look to protect all properties that signed up for and received the flood resilience grant following the floods of Storm Ciara. However, there may be instances where an adjoining neighbour, for example, that might not have been eligible for that grant may have to be included within the scheme to ensure full protection to all of the properties. We will look at those properties on a case-by-case basis. But yes, there will be certain instances where there will be some properties that might not have been initially eligible. If they can provide proof or evidence that they have suffered from internal flooding, then yes, we will potentially be able to include them on the scheme. Okay, just looking at the next question, bear with me a second. We've got a question. So flood resilience per property is of course vital and appreciated. However, flood resilience per neighbourhood is surely of equal concern to protecting any individual properties within it. Is there any part of this support that can enable us to put enough pressure on KCT and Tunbridge Wells Borough Council to assess flood risk in our streets immediately outside properties and fix any serious flood risks such as severely damaged road drainage? So yes, so it's a very good question, and it's a question outside of this scheme, unfortunately. But we are addressing the most vulnerable properties within Five Oak Green through this scheme. So any of those properties that have or were affected from Storm Ciara or any floods since, they should be eligible to receive these measures. Regarding other things about putting pressure on other local authorities, I'm unable to comment on that, I'm afraid. But yes, in terms of eligibility scheme, yeah, we are trying to capture those most vulnerable on this project. Okay, just looking to see if there's any more questions coming through. Can't see any at the moment. But if there are any more, you can put them into the chat. Give it a few more seconds.
So if I may then, just while we're waiting on any more questions coming in, one thing that comes up quite regularly is people ask about dealing with groundwater. You know, people often report in floods that, well, water come up through the floors, and you know, that was the main point of ingress, and therefore doorway protection isn't appropriate. Just stress that all these measures work as a system. I mean, we have pumps to look at groundwater issues. Although incorporated with that, we also look at the automatic air brake protection, because oftentimes people haven't quite realised where the water is actually ingressing from. So REB consultants will take up part of their survey looking at, as Russell mentioned, the sort of source pathway receptor approach. Often there's multiple pathways. So in a sort of systems-based approach, looking at protecting the air brakes and incorporating pumps to do the groundwater to deal with these multiple ingress routes are very, very important. The works inspection survey is quite a detailed survey. We're looking at all potential ingress routes, many of which aren't immediately obvious. So it's worthwhile just when we're there. Talk us through the experience in the flood in the past. We'll also know what to look for. But please ask any questions at the time of the survey around our rationale behind our approach and the measures that we're proposing. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything to that, or.
No, I think you've covered everything off there, David. No, that's really useful. Thank you for that. We've got another question as well about would we consider pulling funds between neighbours for mutually beneficial drainage systems in gardens? Now, unfortunately, on this scheme, we can only pull funding for individual properties, and we will only be able to protect individual properties with PFR measures. The way the funding works for this scheme is that we have to protect the entirety of the property, the main part of the property, with these measures, and we will protect up to 600 millimetres or 2 foot high in old language. And yeah, that's the only way, unfortunately, we can use the funding for this scheme. Okay, some more questions. Got a question here. If your property price is more than allowed, would we have to pay the excess? Yes. So basically, we have a limit per property in terms of budget. Generally speaking, we can accommodate most sort of average size properties within that, and we'll be able to fully provide all of the measures required for that property. However, there are some rare cases where some larger properties that do require more measures and more complicated solutions, we may ask for a contribution if it does go over that budget. Okay, and then I think we've got a question from Susanna, I think. Go ahead, Susanna. Not sure if you're on mute.
Susanna, do you want to take yourself off mute?
Hey, sorry, it was a question from Mark Rich, Susie's partner. I already put it on the chat there. It was about the pulling funding and possibly putting in measures for such as drainage that might be mutually beneficial to protect properties. But I can understand from what you've explained that your funding and doesn't extend to that. It seems like it's quite a tight remit, which possibly really ties the hands of some of the measures that we can take to protect ourselves.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's a valid point you raise. As I say, these measures are designed to protect individual properties up to that 600 millimetres. Obviously, there are other solutions as well to try and reduce flood risk locally to your property as well. RAB will be able to advise on some of those resilience measures, the sort of further steps that you might be able to take to reduce your risk. But yeah, unfortunately, in the case of this scheme, it will be resistance measures directly onto your property. But yeah, thank you for your question. Okay, we've just had a question again around if we have to pay any contributions again after for any larger properties. If so, can we pay in instalments? That's a very good question, actually. I don't think so. As far as I'm aware, we will make you aware of what that contribution is, and then we will then be in contact with you to arrange payment for that. Thank you. Okay, there's no more questions in the chat at the moment. Oh, no, as I say, that one has just popped up. Okay, so yes, we've got some good positive feedback here from one of the residents. So having already been surveyed, I should like to assure others that it was a simple and painless process that gave me confidence in measures being proposed for my property. So yeah, thank you for that feedback. That's really, really good to hear.
Yes, thank you very much. Sorry, Matt, there was one question around checking existing measures. One of the earlier parts of the chat. I can't see it for looking at it just now, but yes, while we're carrying out the works inspection survey, if there are any PFR measures already fitted, we are more than happy to have a look at them, assess them for their suitability and reliability, and advise if there's something that we can improve upon, or look at if there's any maintenance requirements on those existing pre-installed measures. So if that is the case, actually, it'd be most helpful if you could have any barrier panels or any of the component parts that need to be fitted on hand. Usually what we'll do is test fit them. That's usually the best way to assess at the point of our works inspection survey if they are indeed appropriate.
Yep. Thank you for that, David. No, that's really helpful. We've just had a question come in around a cut-off date to request the survey. We would advise that you get in touch with Watertight as soon as possible to arrange a survey. We've provided you with the details for that as well, but if you do have any more questions regarding the survey, you can also make contact with us via our project email address, or you can also contact David as well directly, and one of us will be able to advise.
Yeah, certainly. If I just may add, yeah, we commence on 20th September is the next survey, next week for surveying that we're booking into. There will be surveys following that pick up, so if you're unavailable that week, yeah, please don't worry. Contact us, let us know when you are available, and we'll make the appropriate arrangements.
Excellent, thank you, David. I'm just having a look through the chat again for any more questions. Yes, so this is about, so it's someone that's already been surveyed, but it's worth noting that the boundary limits to what can be protected as part of the household for others. So in this instance, I think the homeowner had a conservatory that couldn't be protected because there was no outside masonry walls. And I think that from memory, it might have been a timber construction. But again, David, maybe you'd be able to touch on just the sort of construction types of certain buildings and their suitability for these measures.
Yes, so ourselves as Watertight and RIB consultants will look at and discuss the construction of the property during the work inspection survey. Generally, main areas for concern would be single skin walls. They bring two considerations around structural integrity of the wall itself, ability to withstand pressure of flood water acting against it, and also just the ability of the single skin wall itself to resist flood water. There are a number of methods that we can apply to deal with single skin walls if we encounter them. In terms of conservatories, generally we'll often have to retreat the protection to an inner door just due to the size of the conservatory. If the walls or the sort of low level windows of the conservatory are present and therefore not suitable. There are, as you saw in the demonstration photos, modular barrier systems which can surround conservatories, but again, there's often two concerns with that. One is cost, and the second one is just the practicality of it, and the time to deploy those barriers may mean that they prove ineffective, and protecting the inner door to benefit the rest of the property, the living space within the home, is usually a more suitable or pragmatic approach to protecting that individual property. These are all things we'd look at sort of on an individual basis during the work inspection survey. Can't think of anything else to.
I think just to add to that, David, so part of our survey as well is to advise on what the sort of recoverability measures as well that you may, although it's not part of the scheme, but we do provide some advice for you as to what measures you might take to make areas like conservatories more recoverable. So that actually it's just a case of mopping it down and cleaning it up much more quickly, kind of as Sue and Mary were describing in their video that we showed earlier. How actually you can make the experience a lot shorter and easier to clear up. So we'll also make comment and recommendations regarding the sorts of recoverability measures that you might like to take on board yourselves. I understand not part of this scheme funding, but again, it'll be in the report so we can advise you on that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Russell. Yeah, that's really useful information as well, and it's a really important aspect to consider for property flood resilience, because yeah, obviously it's terrible getting flooded, but if you can try and lessen that duration in terms of getting back into your property and yeah, making things more recoverable quicker, that's also really useful information as well. Okay, so I think we're pretty much there on time now, but yeah, I'm just going to end the call now, but thank you all for joining the call. We look forward to seeing you at one of the surveys on the week of the 20th. Yeah, if you do have any more questions in the meantime, please feel free to contact us at the project email address, which I think was on the last slide, Chris. I'm not sure if you can pop that back up quickly. But yeah, have a good rest of the evening, and yeah, thank you for joining. Thank you very much.
All right, Matt, if I may ask you just before everybody signs off.
All right, okay.
Apologies. I'd actually just like to take this opportunity to introduce everybody to Connor Caldwell. He's actually sitting next to me and has been beside me throughout. If hang on, the screen's there.
Oh yeah. Hi everyone, how's it going?
So yeah, Connor is assistant project manager for this. It'll be between myself and Connor.
Well, I think we're struggling to hear you there, David.
Oh.
No, I think we're still struggling to hear you, I'm afraid. I'm not sure if it's the microphone placement, but
there.
Yeah.
Sorry, is that better?
That's better, yeah.
Yeah. So I have to turn it back around in a second, but yes, I made a bit of a hash of it, but yes, Connor's assistant project manager. We've sort of taken an approach to the needs of these projects and the individual requirements of the properties and the relationships that we build and develop with residents throughout these schemes. It's best that we have a fairly close working relationship and minimise the number of people actually working on a project management role within these projects. So if I just turn this around, hopefully you can all see the corner. Hello.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you, yeah.
Perfect.
Good to put a name to a face.
Yeah, no, that's it. That's the best thing to do. So yeah, if anyone needs to even contact me, it's Connor at Watertight international.com, and I'm happy to answer any of your queries and speak to you. But within the next couple of weeks, it'll probably be myself or David that'll be getting in contact to book in some surveys. So I look forward to meeting you all within the next few weeks, and thanks very much for tuning in.
Thanks. And then Matt, Denise had her hand up.
Yeah, yes. Thank you, Chris. So I just wanted to put a face to the name. Obviously, I've been in touch with you all throughout this period, and I just want to. It's been a really long, tough time. We were February 2020, then we were hit by lockdown, and then there's been further rain. Tunbridge Wells Borough Council could have just quite easily just provided the grant that you initially had, but what we decided to do is pursue with this scheme, and it's thanks to the parish council, Charles and Carol at the time, that actually went around trying to make sure we got the right number of people to make us eligible for the scheme. So it's a real pat on the back. I do promote Capel Parish Council very much for the flood group work that you have and the passion that you have, and sometimes the the grief I might get from Charles at times, but our intentions are there to try and work, and I'm really confident that we've got this together. And it's real thank you to the Environment Agency to get us on the back of the East Peckham scheme, because had we not, we would have been another 6 months or longer. So I just want to thank everyone for joining the webinar tonight, and patience with us, and we'll hopefully get this through, and we can then get you talking to others, promoting the good work of what all the team has done. Thank you.
And then just to finalize, there was a question about doors that Gloria asked. So Gloria, we will put up some examples on the website that you can look at probably tomorrow or the next day.
Thanks, Chris, for that. Yes, and yeah, thank you again. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you on the survey. So yeah, I think we'll end the call there now. And yeah, have a good rest of the evening. Thank you.
See you later. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.